Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope you have the most wonderful year ahead and that you feel well, loved, and joyful, and that your year is filled with things that make your heart and spirit feel full. I want to start the year with something that's very close to my heart. And if you've been a long-time podcast listener, you would have heard me share this story before. I'm going to share it again for all the new listeners who are now part of the Let's Talk Yoga community. My mother passed away a little over 5 years ago, and she passed due to a lung disease. And without going into too many details, it was essentially a type of disease that slowly and painfully hardened her lungs to a point where she could no longer breathe and eventually ended up passing away. It took years of slow degeneration. And during those many years, she also had multiple cancer diagnoses and chemotherapy, in fact, sped up the lung deterioration. And it was a very challenging phase, to say the least. But in all her hardship, she would ask me questions about pranayama and she would try to practice. Her lung disease had given her insane amounts of cough, persistent cough for years on end, which sometimes on rough days she couldn't even speak because her cough was that bad. But she would try in her good days, and even her good days were hard. She would try to work on her breath, and she was such an optimist. But eventually, at the age of 61, her lungs gave up and her organs gave up, and she passed. So for the longest time, I felt very guilty about breathing deeply, especially because it's something I tell people to do all the time, to take a deep breath. And I felt such a deep sense of guilt just saying that, because every time I said that, I had memories of her struggling to breathe. Imagine your entire day for years on end is just spent in trying to take a breath, nothing else. You can do nothing else in your day other than just try to take a breath. So after she passed, there was this phase where I would not be able to connect to my breath. Sometimes I would even hold my breath to experiment to see what it feels like. And as a result, I stopped practicing pranayama because it was just too painful for me to sit and celebrate my breath. But over time, I realized that what I was feeling was not guilt. It was grief, which I had misunderstood as guilt. So I offer this pranayama teacher training and immersive program every year, and it is created to celebrate our collective ability to breathe freely and to thrive with our breath in a way that my mother could never do. And it's also a way in which I get to keep her memory alive. And I know that had she been alive today, she would have been championing something like this. So I continue to share pranayama in the form of this training and celebrating the gift of breath. It is my way of turning her pain into my purpose. So long story short, this is a labor of love. I offer a few different courses, but this one always hits differently. It has a special place in my heart. So for the next few weeks on the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, you will see me showcase a variety of different conversations about pranayama. I want you to pay close attention to these episodes. Whether you are a new or a seasoned teacher or listener of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, you will get tremendous value from these episodes. Pranayama is dynamic, it is engaging, and it is so very interesting. What has been lacking in modern yoga, according to me, is the teachers and courses and education that simplify pranayama and make it relatable to the day and times that we live in, and mainly how to transition our students from learning asana and loving asana to introducing pranayama in a way that will actually make them enjoy it, benefit from it, and leave them wanting more. So if you are interested in building a relationship with your breath, forget pranayama, just a relationship with your breath, and you want to bring that in with your students and take them deeper and build this bridge, this relationship with your breath, then pay attention to the episodes that are coming up in the weeks ahead. So often I hear yoga teachers say, I want to teach deeper yoga. I want to showcase that yoga is more than asana. Well, here's your perfect opportunity. The body is now familiar to many students with asana, and then it's time to take them to the sukshma sharira, the subtle body with the breath. So this pranayama course is a fantastic start point. It is one of the best pranayama courses out there in the yoga world. I actually challenge you to go look for a course that is this structured and available in a certain capacity. It is very authentic, and it has been built from my years in pranayama classes and with teachers. Anyway, I'm just in love with this course. I hope that you will too at the end of these episodes. So that's what we're up to on the Let's Talk Yoga podcast for the next few weeks. We are getting nerdy about pranayama. But before I get to today's episode, where I actually talk about if you are an asana teacher, how do you know when you are ready for pranayama? Okay? And what are the markers? There are such clear markers. I want you to use this episode as a checklist to see if you are ready for, because honestly, some of you are more than ready, and for some of you, it may be too soon. But a few details before today's episode begins. This pranayama course is literally 6 weeks away. Now, if you're listening to it on the week this drops, then it's 6 weeks away. It starts February 14th. It is completely online. There are 6 live classes once a week. The dates are on the website. There are 2 alumni classes as well. The entire course is built for online consumption. You have access to everything in the course for 6 months. There's a whole bunch of recap videos, sequences, manuals, assignments, Zoom lessons, asana practices, and so much more. All of these are available for 6 months. A big chunk of it is downloadable and you can keep it with you forever. The early bird pricing is on right now. The early bird ends on January 20th, 20. So make sure you note the date for that. I'm hosting an info session on January 24th. The link to that, to sign up for that, is in the show notes. But you need to know that the early bird runs out before the info session. So if you listen to these episodes and other episodes on the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, and you are convinced that you're going to be doing this, make sure you sign up and you don't wait. Every year, hundreds of yoga teachers go through this course, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Imagine spending another year without building this relationship, this friendship with your breath. It is such a game changer. It has enhanced so many people's lives. It has transformed the way they show up on their mat. It has helped so many yoga students. So I can't wait for you to be a part of this course. If you are also waiting for my 300-hour online teacher training, know that this is a module. So whether you do it this year or next year, you will need to do the pranayama module. So just make sure that you get it done sooner than later. Okay. Once again, all the details are in the show notes. You can also head to ahamyoga.com to sign up for the pranayama teacher training and grab the early bird price. Here's today's episode. Hi everyone, I'm Arundhati, and you've just tuned in to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, your ultimate online destination for learning about yoga. Whether you're a seasoned yoga teacher or a curious yoga student, there's something for you here. Let this podcast be your virtual yoga school. We offer insights, inspiration, and loads of nerdy exploration of yoga along the way. But first, who am I? I'm an Indian immigrant yoga teacher living in America for the past decade. I have my own yoga school here in Seattle, and I'm also a Bollywood choreographer, and I've nurtured a thriving yoga community at my studio, as well as a global yoga audience through my courses and this podcast. Through this podcast, I intend to create a space for you, the yoga student and yoga teacher, to learn about yoga in depth. Think of this as your online yoga school, free teacher training coming to you every week. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in. In today's episode, we're going to be doing a deep dive into 2 main parts. Part 1 is when do you actually start studying pranayama? Like, when are you ready to study pranayama? What are the telltale signs of, okay, now I can move on from asana into pranayama? And the second part of this conversation is, if you teach asana in some capacity. When are you ready to teach pranayama? How do you know when you are ready to teach pranayama is what we're going to get into as part 2 of this conversation. I'm going to give you very clear markers as to what to work with. Okay. So by the end of this episode, you have clarity about this topic. Okay. And again, if you know this excites you, there is always more in-depth information and knowledge waiting for you in the training itself. So let's begin with part 1. Okay. How do you know you are ready to do a deep dive into pranayama study? To explore this question, you first have to understand why this question is even coming up. Okay. Because this question's coming up because knowingly or unknowingly, sometimes we end up at the doors of pranayama too soon. Okay. And this can actually have a negative effect on your experience. Okay. You may not relate to pranayama. You may not understand how to do what the teacher is asking you to do. You may find it boring and you may not even enjoy it. Okay. But we don't do pranayama for enjoyment. Okay. We don't do yoga for enjoyment. For enjoyment, you go hang with your friends, you go to a movie, you go out for dinner, you go for a walk. Those are things you do for enjoyment. But I bring this up because a lot of people nowadays come to pranayama and yoga for enjoyment. And especially as yoga teachers, we're not coming here for enjoyment. Okay. And while I can do a whole podcast episode just on this, I'm just going to slowly move along and remind you that it's important to prepare yourself for pranayama. Okay. That way, when you explore the practice, you resonate with it deeply and you connect with it right away in experience. Okay. It should not feel vague or fluffy. There is nothing imaginary in pranayama. It is an exact science and it is a precise system that has been handed over by yogis for centuries. Okay. With care and caution. So to really prepare for pranayama, there are 5 steps to really prepare for pranayama that you need to keep in mind. Step 1 is understand where pranayama begins. Okay, this is crucial. If you are invested in a long-term steady practice of pranayama, knowing this will be a game changer. Okay, so I'm asking you, where does pranayama begin? In fact, I want you to pause the podcast or the video just for a moment and give this a thought. Okay, where does pranayama begin? Most people think that pranayama begins when you enroll into a pranayama class or a series or you pick up a pranayama book. Okay. But the truth is pranayama actually begins in asana. Okay. Pranayama begins in asana or in the physical practice of yoga. Okay. And while I will be going more in depth in the training as to what this actually means, in a sense, think of it as your body awareness is enhanced through asana. Okay. Most people only pay attention to their bodies externally. Not many of us are aware of our bodies internally. Okay. So asana makes you body aware. It converts attention to awareness. Asana also helps to make your respiratory system more able. Okay. In many ways, it conditions your breath. It prepares you for deeper practices of yoga over time. And if you're curious about what type of asana is required for pranayama or to prepare for pranayama, that's something we'll go into in depth in the training itself. Okay. So remember, step 1 is to understand where pranayama begins, and pranayama begins in asana. Anyone who starts asana first and then goes into pranayama, high quality, high caliber asana education, will have a greater chance of being more connected to pranayama than someone who just walks in, who has no clue of how to sit, what yoga is all about, and just tries to close their eyes and go to their breath right away. Okay. Step 2 is understand the role of time and the maturation of practice. As a practice, pranayama cannot be understood in a short span. Okay. Actually, let me say that theoretically, even some of the pranayama practices, they need you to do this for a long time. Okay. They can be understood and they can be practiced with reasonable success, but you need to allow for more time to really reach that state of maturation within you. You want to get to a stage where pranayama is not just about techniques and counts and stages, but it goes beyond your inhalations and exhalations. It brings you a quietude. It makes you, in many ways, deeply connected to your inner self. It should make you more reflective and wholesome from within. Okay, pranayama should draw you within, and you can't really will this for it to happen. It is something that you have to do with consistent practice and time, and over time, it has to be organic. Okay, so think of it as time continuous sadhana, and allowing space for that maturation is key to make this happen. Okay, so step 2 is understand the role of time and maturation of the practice. Now, step 3 is the importance of understanding the role of a guide, a mentor, or a teacher, aka your basic source for pranayama. Okay, I highly, highly recommend that you learn from one teacher or one school for pranayama. Okay, because you cannot go deep into an established system if you keep bouncing around from teacher to teacher, style to style, class to class when it comes to pranayama. In yoga and in pranayama, a teacher is a non-negotiable on this journey. While in modern yoga, we think that pranayama is a one-size-fits-all, in reality, there are many nuances to pranayama. Okay, and experiences can come up for you or your students, and a teacher or a mentor can help guide you and make this journey as deep and smooth as possible instead of you just trying to course correct and figure this out on your own. Remember that learning yoga from a deeply grounded in yoga wisdom kind of teacher is deeply fulfilling. And I bet you feel that sometimes when you listen to some of the guests or the conversations on this podcast, right? You feel it within you. So think of this as 10x of that. I cannot put into words what it means to be fully present with a gifted teacher who can really change and uplift your yoga. So take time to find that one source and stick to them and learn deeply within that source if it's legit. Okay. So step 3 is to find the guide, a mentor, a teacher, or a reliable source for pranayama. Step 4 is replace your I want more mindset with more refinement instead. Okay. Now, in the popular yoga narrative, we constantly think that we need to learn more yoga, do one more course, do one more training, listen to one more podcast episode. But the truth is we don't need to learn more all the time. Okay, we need to sit with what we have learned and immerse in living our yoga and understanding it more. Okay, and in different capacities, in different stages of life, this will change. However, practices like asana, pranayama, kriyas, dhyana, etc., they are meant to create, okay, these are practices that are meant to create certain states within you, okay, and they make you engage with the world in a certain way, okay. And when you practice these different techniques, whatever those techniques are, you should be uncovering more ananda within you, more bliss within you. So my sincerest hope is that when you study pranayama, you actually spend more time refining what you have learned. Okay, working through your experience and building your own foundation and understanding, and not necessarily getting caught up in this thing of I need to learn more pranayama techniques for this to be significant in my life. Okay. So again, in the training, I will give you all the tools, the techniques, the support you need, but you have to meet me halfway. Okay. Step 5 is, can you find more ananda within you in this practice? Okay. Step 5 is, can you find more ananda or bliss within you in this practice? Ananda is bliss. Okay. And I would actually extend that to contentment, reverence for all beings, including yourself, inner joy that is not conditional upon anything or anyone. Okay. And just a state of bliss for just the state of bliss. Okay. And compassion for the sake of being compassionate, being in this state of constant inner reflection where it doesn't feel like it's effort. It doesn't feel like it's forced. It's just how you are. It's your natural way of existing. So pranayama should bring you into a quieter, more reflective state. Okay. It should make higher living your default way of living. You are no longer tangled and at the mercy of all your senses and all the pettiness in life, but you are in a little more control of who you are. Okay. And we'll be exploring more of this through the koshas in the training, but those are your 5 steps to see if you are ready to start studying pranayama. You understand where pranayama begins. You understand the role of time and maturation of the practice that is needed. You find a teacher, a mentor, or a guide, essentially go to the source. And then you replace this I want to learn more techniques attitude with I want to immerse more and refine this more. And lastly is whatever you've learned so far, is that giving you some contentment? Is that increasing your ananda within you? Okay, so those are your 5 steps to recognize if you are ready for deep pranayama studies. Okay, now let's move on to part 2 of this conversation. Okay, when do you know you are ready to teach pranayama?
Okay. Are there any signs that you can rely on? And to be honest, this is a really challenging topic to speak on because there are internal markers, there are external markers. And even the sincerest of teachers sometimes do not get access to credible sources. So it's really hard to say if there is a definite set of things you can look for. But here's what I have come up with for you. Okay. Firstly, you need to be established in all the 5 things we spoke about as a student. Okay. And then you want to check to see if you have a deeply established asana practice. Okay. And when not just asana practice, but you incorporate a wider and deeper set of yogic practices, you become more reflective in nature. You're kind and compassionate version of yourself, and it feels natural to you. It doesn't feel forced, and you're constantly connected to your inner nature and being. Then that's part 1. Okay. Then you look at, are you ready to lead others in this inner journey, this inner experience, because you have a lot of clarity about the practice and workings of pranayama. You know the technical know-how, and you offer it with a deep sense of service and humility, and you understand how this works on different people's bodies, and you know, very importantly, when it's time to hold back. Okay, because depending on who the student is, you need to know how much to offer and how much to hold back for their safety. Okay. And you can see and recognize the ripeness or the rawness of the student in front of you. Okay. And then you play the long game with pranayama. You teach yoga the way it was meant to be taught, and you pass it on the same way. You have a teacher that you can constantly go back to, be mentored by, you can ask questions to, and where you feel like you are safe in that teacher's presence, and they will genuinely help you grow in your pranayama teaching and practice. Okay, because questions will arise as your experience keeps evolving. And then lastly, you should be okay with not teaching pranayama. And this is an important marker. Okay, because until you feel like you have understood it, you've practiced it, and you really live it in your bones, until then, don't teach it. Okay, all I want to say is nowadays we learn to teach. Okay, but you want to learn for the sake of learning. If you are in my Mindful Yoga Teachers Club, you'll hear me say this often. Learn for the sake of learning. Enjoy it for the sake of just learning, and not necessarily thinking how and when and what will you teach in future. Okay, so while pranayama is fascinating, okay, and it's really hard for an external person to tell you if you are ready or not. But if you feel intrigued, you feel curious, and you feel like, okay, I want to explore this, then the best way to set yourself up for success is to study it and then take it from there. Okay. By setting yourself up for success, I mean, make sure you get good quality, high caliber yoga education where everything is structured, nothing is woo-woo. You find a teacher who is invested in you over just beyond the hours of training, someone who is available to you in some form of a mentorship or questions or community. And then you have to create time and space for this type of a learning in your life. Okay. And go all in. Don't do it for, the sake of doing it. Create a pranayama training season in your life. Like this training is 6 weeks. Create 6 weeks. You need 2 hours a week to be in the live classes and maybe 10 minutes of some reading work. But create the space and treat it as an online immersive study program for yourself and make the most of it. We live in a time where this type of knowledge and wisdom is available at our fingertips. But we need to make sure that we are vessels who are ready to take this knowledge. Okay. So make sure you create an environment where you can learn deeply.
Thank you for listening. Once again, the pranayama training starts on February 14th. You can go to the show notes and click the links below to sign up for the training. I will see you next week with another episode. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.